For centuries gold was the one thing even governments couldn't fake. It didn't rust, it couldn't be printed. And whether in London, Cairo or Beijing, it always shined the same. It was humanity's closest touch with a universal truth. Until the day nations learned how to steal their own gold. This is the Financial Historian, where money, power and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it seems. When we hear gold heist, most of us imagine masked robbers, armored trucks and Hollywood chase scenes. But the biggest gold thefts in history weren't done with guns. They were done with pens, laws and silent signatures behind closed doors. Because when a government moves its own gold, it's not called a robbery. It's called policy. A century ago the world lived under the gold standard. Every major currency, the dollar, the pound, the franc, was tied to a fixed amount of gold. If you held a banknote, you could take it to your central bank and demand its value in gold. The system relied entirely on trust and discipline. No country could print more money than the gold it owned. But wars and rising debt slowly destroyed that discipline. The gold standard became an illusion. Vaults stayed locked, but the people still believed the gold was there. Until that belief finally shattered. When war broke out, European nations suspended the gold standard, seized citizens' gold and replaced it with paper money. Vaults were sealed, the gold vanished. Not by robbers but by governments. After the war, economies collapsed and currencies became worthless. Germany's mark, Austria's krone, Russia's ruble all turned into paper. Only gold kept its value. And that made it dangerous. Because gold exposed the lie of paper money. So governments decided to control the illusion instead. During the Great Depression, US President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued an executive order. Owning gold was now illegal. Every citizen had to turn their gold into the government in exchange for $2,067 per ounce. Those who refused faced prison. Months later, the government raised the price of gold to $35 per ounce. Overnight, the value of America's gold reserves increased by 70%. Ordinary Americans had been legally robbed. It was one of the boldest financial moves in history, and it worked. The gold stayed in Washington. The people were left with paper stamped backed by gold. Though no one could touch it anymore. After World War II, Europe lay in ruins, but the US was overflowing with gold. 2/3 of the world's supply sat in American vaults. This power allowed the US to shape a new world order in 1944. The Bretton Woods system. Every currency would be pegged to the dollar. And the dollar would be pegged to gold. It looked flawless, but it was all based on trust. And like gold, trust has limits. By the 1960s, America was spending uncontrollably. On Korea, Vietnam, the space race and social programs. Dollars flowed out, but gold didn't flow back. French President Charles de Gaulle noticed. He sent a warship to New York, loaded it with billions in dollars. And demanded physical gold. Other countries followed. Tons of gold began leaving the United States. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television. "I am temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold." Temporarily, but it never came back. That single announcement ended the gold standard forever. The US had successfully taken control. Not just of gold but of global confidence itself. Money was no longer backed by metal, only by belief. To keep the system alive, Washington found a new anchor: oil. It struck a deal with Saudi Arabia and OPEC. Oil could only be sold in US dollars. The world no longer needed gold, it needed dollars to buy energy. Confidence in the dollar was now backed not by gold but by geopolitical power. After 1971, governments said gold doesn't matter anymore. But behind the scenes they kept trading, leasing and manipulating it. They called it monetary policy. But it was the same old game. Just with better suits and no fingerprints. In the late 1990s, Britain announced it would sell over half of its gold reserves, about 400 tons. The sale crashed gold prices to their lowest level in 20 years. Soon after, prices tripled. critics argued it wasn't a mistake, but a bailout for powerful financial institutions. By then the West had stopped hoarding gold. It had learned to control it instead. In the 2000s, China, Russia and India began quietly buying gold. Not as a trend but as a strategy. They understood what the West had forgotten. Gold may no longer back currencies, but it still backs trust. And in times of crisis, trust is everything. Today central banks are buying gold at record levels. Yet no one truly knows who owns how much. America's gold reserves haven't been audited since 1953. Why all the secrecy? Because gold isn't just a reserve, it's a signal of confidence. If a nation hides its gold, it fears for its future. If it sells, it believes it's in control. But if it lies about it, it's already lost control. When Spain's gold fleets ran dry in the 1600s, its empire collapsed. When Britain's reserves drained after 2 world wars, its dominance ended. And today, as the dollar system cracks under record debt, gold whispers the same warning once again. If America can't defend trust with paper, someone else will defend it with metal. The great gold heist never truly ended. It just became more polite, hidden behind economics and central banking. So when a government says, "Don't worry, the gold is safe," remember, gold is always safe. Until the day it isn't. If this story gave you a new perspective, subscribe. Because history has already given us the answers. You just need to know where to look.